Hello, this is candidate master Viktor Neustroev, and today we are going to observe the game number 9 between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana from World Chess Championship. So the game was played yesterday, and you can guess the result, but I believe you understand that it was a draw. So now the score is 4.5 to 4.5. 3 more classical games left. Then, if they all end in a draw, after that, these grandmasters will play 4 rapid games and then a few blitz games. However, I believe when they play rapid, one of the sides will win. Okay, anyway, let's analyze the game that was played yesterday. And in that game, Magnus Carlsen was playing with white pieces. Fabiano Caruana was played as black. Again, it was c4 e5, English opening, like it was in the 4th game of this match. And knight c3, knight f6, just the same line. Knight f3, knight c6, g3, d5, c takes on d5, knight takes on d5, bishop g2. So remember, last time I told you that knight b6 is the most common move here, but bishop c5 also makes sense, and this is currently the most popular continuation among grandmasters. So if, for example, knight e5, then knight takes on c3. If bishop takes on c6, then pawn takes here, b takes on c3, but then after queen d5, knight f3 and bishop h3. Black one is slightly better. Oh, maybe not much, but at least black has a compensation for the sacrificed pawn. If, for example, here instead of taking on c6 with the bishop, then b takes on c3, then knight e5, d4, and bishop d6. So in this position, black is also fine. If, for example, instead of b takes on c3, bishop c6, pawn takes, and here d takes on c3, then queen d1, king d1, bishop f2, rook f1, bishop c5, rook f7, bishop d6. But that's not the end. Rook f3, bishop takes, but then the bishop is pinned. And after rook f1, the position should be fine for black. He's down a pawn, but his pieces are more active. And again, here we have the endgame of the with bishops of opposite color, which has many drawish tendencies. Okay, so bishop c5, castle, like it was in the previous game, castle, and d3. If knight d5 instead of this move, queen g5 and knight to g5, then attacking the queen on d5, then queen d8, and knight takes on h7 with the idea if king takes, then queen c2, taking the bishop, but then rook e8, and the knight there is almost trapped. Knight g5, queen takes, then d4, queen h5, d takes on c5, rook d8, bishop d2, and knight d4 gives black a decent counterplay. So now the pawn here is hanging, then maybe there can be any counterplay with bishop h3 move. Okay, good. However, it was played d3 in the game. d3, then rook e8. Bishop b6 was another good move. And if you remember, in the 4th game it was played bishop d2. However, in this game, after bishop d2 in that game, Magnus Carlsen didn't achieve anything. That's why here he played bishop g5. This motif is well known. This is how black plays the Sicilian line of dragon. So here we see almost we see the same position with reversed colors. F6 is the most natural move, but then queen b3 attacking on d5. And if bishop e6, then queen takes on b7. And here white seems to be better. Knight d to b4, protecting the knight on c6, but queen b5 attacking the bishop, so black has not enough time to take the bishop on g5. And also the queen escapes. If here knight d goes to e7, no, that makes sense, but this is not what black tries to achieve in this variation. So that's why it was played knight c3. If bishop takes on d8, then knight takes on d1. Bishop c7, knight takes on b2. That's why b takes on c3 and f6 in this position. Now we shouldn't be worried about queen b3 because it's just a check. We play bishop e6 and two of his pieces will be under attack. In this position, bishop e3 was played by some other not very strong players, but this move doesn't provide white with any advantage. Even black is better there. Bishop c1 played by Magnus Carlsen is much better, and he still keeps the d2 square for the knight. Bishop e6, bishop b2. And in this position, Fabiano Caruana played bishop b6. Well, what other options did he have? For example, e4. Then, if d takes on e4, queen takes on d1, rook f takes on d1, and bishop c4 retaking this pawn, e3, rook a d8, and this bishop's activity gives black the compensation for their sacrificed pawn. If after e4 knight d4, then knight takes knight, pawn takes on d4, bishop takes on e4, then c6, and here black is fine. So bishop b6 was played. d4, bishop d5. Here black tries to neutralize the bishop on g2, but queen c2 was played with the idea to advance the pawn to e4 and occupy the center with one more pawn, and then later play d5. That's why here e takes on d4, c takes on d4, and bishop e4, queen b3, and bishop d5, offering a draw. Another option was to play queen d5 in this position, but after queen takes, bishop takes, and e3, white is just slightly better. And maybe just black decided to get a draw as soon as he can. So bishop d5, if now queen c2, it will be just repetition of the position. That's why queen d1. And I believe in this position, black made a mistake. Maybe not a huge mistake, but he made the move which is unlogical in this position. So maybe knight f5 was better with the idea to get the knight to c4. Maybe queen d7, but he played bishop takes on f3. Then queen b3 check. If, for example, bishop f3 now, then knight d4, bishop takes on d4, queen takes on d4, and queen b3 check. king h8. No, it will be just a transposition of the moves, but so he decided to play queen b3 first, king. No, bishop d5 doesn't make sense because we just capture with the bishop here, the check, and black doesn't win the pawn on d5, on d4 I mean. So king h8, bishop f3, knight d4, bishop takes on d4, queen takes on d4, e3 attacking the queen, queen has to move, queen d6. Okay, actually in this game he moved to e5, but if queen d6, then bishop takes here, rook b8, rook d8, queen f8, bishop c6. And actually this move doesn't win any material, because after queen c4 the exchange and the piece are hanging both, so black loses the exchange. So queen e5 was played in the game, bishop takes b7, rook d8, and rook a to d1. What can I say? In this position, white got a stable advantage. However, it's not easy to convert this advantage into a winning position. What do you think? What is the best plan when you play the middle game with the bishops of opposite color? You know, if you pass the game into the endgame and, for example, trade all major pieces, the queens and the rooks, oh, I believe it's enough to trade just a pair of queen and a pair of rooks. I leave the rook and the bishop against the rook and the bishop. Then this kind of positions has many drawish tendencies. So that's why if white wants to succeed here, he shouldn't trade material, and he'd better leave the queen on the board. And the best way to succeed is to start the attack on the enemy king. So here white bishop is better than black one, because this one is restricted by white pawns. And this one is good, it can attack on h7. So this bishop is slightly better, so that's why white can be more active in his attack, and maybe he can try to create something. But unfortunately, he didn't create, however, he tried. Okay, queen a7 was played. h4, it's a good move. The idea is to play h5 and then try to attack the h7 pawn. And if here later h6 is played, then it weakens light squares significantly. g6 was played by Magnus Carlsen. If, for example, rook d1, rook takes on d1, rook d8, then we take with the rook and play h5. And if g6 now, then queen goes to f7. G takes on h5 and bishop e4. So these pawns are weak now. And two of them dies. So that's why black should be very careful in this position. So he didn't take, he played g6, that was the right move. And if only now white has an extra temper, I believe he would be better. So for example, something like king g2 and then h5 is much better. Another good move is bishop c6 here. But again, black has enough resources to defend his position. So rook d1, rook takes on d1, rook d8, rook d8, queen d8, queen f7. And we still have an idea to play h5. Okay. So g6 was played, and then Magnus played h5. I think that was the mistake, because after g takes on h5, now black wants to get rid of this pawn by playing h4, with the idea to close the h file with the white pawn on h4. If, for example, in this position king g7, then bishop goes to f3, and then king g2, rook h1, and so on, and this position white can be better. So g takes on h5 was played, queen c4, with the idea to stop h4 move. Oh, you see, if here after g takes on h5 the king is on g2, then rook h1 can be played, and white is threatening to capture. White will be threatening to capture the pawn on h5, and he also stops the h5 h4 move. Okay, queen c4 anyway. f5, another good move by black. He prepares for h5 h4, so he joins the queen. Bishop f3, h4, rook takes rook, g takes on h4, check, king h1, queen f6, queen f4, and bishop c5 with the idea to join the bishop to the king side. And bishop queen f4 move was played because white wants to stop the f pawn. Now this position is absolutely equal, with no chances for white to win. However, let's see what happened then. Rook g1, and here black took on g1. However, he could play bishop d6. Then rook g8, king g8. And maybe it's better for black, because then the h4 pawn will be hanging with check if queen moves. Okay, so rook g1 was played, bishop d6 now in this position. Queen a4. Actually, in this position, Fabiano Caruana was in a time trouble. That's why he played. He made not the best moves, but anyway, he played enough strong to be able to make a draw in this position. f4, queen a7, f takes on a3, queen takes on a3. So, and after queen h4, only 2 pawns left. All black needs to do is just to trade the queens without any pawn losses. White plays a4. That was the move number 37, and Fabiano Caruana had just a few minutes left. I don't know why he played queen f6. Probably he could just take on a4, and there is no way for white to succeed here. Of course, he can play queen h8 and queen h7, but there is no checkmate. Queen f6 looks powerful, but after king e8 again, bishop f7, king escapes. Queen e6, king d8, and the e8 square is covered by their queen. So white can't checkmate in this position, and now if he loses a tempo, black can start the perpetual check. So queen takes on e4 was another possible move, but queen f6, it's still a draw. Bishop d1, queen e5, trading the queens. a5, king g7, a6, and bishop d4 to stop the pawn. King g2, king f6, f4, bishop b6, king f3, and h6. So why h6 and not h5? Of course, black doesn't want to advance his pawns so far, because then he has a chance to lose them. There is no winning plan. However, Magnus Carlsen tried to apply one, but it didn't work. King e4, the king goes to the queen side. Bishop a7, bishop g4 to control the f5 square. Bishop g1 just to lose a tempo. to let white to move. King d5, bishop b6, king c6, bishop e3. If now king c7, bishop f4 check, then bishop goes back to e3 and he stops the pawn. King b7, bishop b6 here, bishop h3, bishop e3 again. King c6 was played in the game, but if a7 here, then bishop takes on a7, king takes on a7, and this pawn dies because the bishop has to stop these two black pawns. For example, c5, bishop f1, king f5, king to b6. So bishop f1 is a very important move because it stops the c pawn. King takes on f4, king c5, and then white just stops the h pawn with bishop c8 or bishop b7. So that was a drawish position. Bishop e3 was played, again king c6, bishop b6 back, king d5, bishop a7. Then after a few moves, king e6, here they agreed to a draw. So you see there is no chances to succeed for any of the sides. However, the computer suggests that the position is better for white, but you see the computer doesn't always evaluate the position correctly, especially if it's an endgame or opening. But the computer is really good when it comes to calculations and the middle game play. And sometimes computer doesn't understand if one of the sides can create a fortress and the other side can't succeed because of that fortress. Okay, so I can say that that was the very good game. They didn't do many mistakes. Actually, they almost didn't do any mistakes. So the main mistake that Fabiano Caruana did was bishop f3 move here. And that's for Magnus Carlsen. I think that he played h5 too early here. Instead of this move, bishop c6 or king g2 could give him more chances to win, but I still believe that after bishop c6 or king g2, Fabiano Caruana was able to make a draw. So h5 lost much of his advantage. Anyway, so let's see what will happen in the game number 10, and maybe one of the sides will win. Let's just hope for this. Thank you for your attention.